Secretly recorded from deep inside the bowels of a decommissioned missile silo, we bring you the man, one single man who wants to bring light to the darkness and dark to the lightness. Although he's not always right, he is always certain. So now, with security protocols in place, the protesters have been forced back behind the barricades and the blast doors are now sealed. Without further delay, let me introduce you to the host of Hutcast, Mr. Tim Hutner.
Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. You can now take your post. Today on Hutcast, we have a special guest today, Gene German from www.permittocarry.us. That's 612-388-2403. Gene is going to update us on his training program and how it applies to you. Other states involved, check with your legals on those. There will be a disclaimer in front of each show so you guys know what and what not to do. Again, permittocarry.us. Look them up, check them out. This is a mini-series, guys, so you're going to have a number of shows behind this. Feel free to tune in. Thanks again for Hutcast. We'll be with you shortly. For home and workplace comfort, we here at Dependable Heating and Air Conditioning have over 30 years of residential and commercial experience in replacing, repairing, and doing general maintenance on your heating and cooling equipment. Call the experts at Dependable Heating and Air Conditioning. For all your indoor comfort needs, we are located in Coon Rapids and serve the entire Twin Cities area. Call one of our professional technicians today at 763-757-5040. That's Dependable Heating and Cooling. Again, 763-757-5040, Dependable Heating and Air.
Leosa Trainers Incorporated and its certified firearms instructors are not attorneys and therefore do not provide any specific legal advice. The legal information contained in this information is general, non-specific information and should not be construed as legal advice to be applied to any specific factual situation. As the law differs in each legal jurisdiction, it may be interpreted or implied differently, depending upon your location or your situation. This training is not a substitute for the advice of your attorney.
Okay, back with Hutcast. Gene is in the studio today, and he has given us his best foot forward. It's actually very wonderful. And we're going to talk about Minnesota Statute 624.714. Go for it, Gene.
Tim, that's actually the carry law. I know we've been talking about relevant laws that really aren't the carry law and how they interplay with this. But this one's important in that, in this point at least, in that it highlights the prohibition on carrying guns into schools. That's where you'll find that. You can carry a gun in Minnesota onto school property. So if I'm driving onto a school parking lot, I can disarm while I'm in my vehicle and then get out of the vehicle and go in the school. If you were in the parking lot 2 or 3 cars down, it wouldn't be okay for me to get out and go down and say hello to you and then come back with my gun on my hip. I'd have to disarm before I left the vehicle. But we can go onto school property. If you do not have a permit to carry, you're prohibited, unless you live in the school zone, you're prohibited from carrying a gun into a school zone, which is 1,000 feet perimeter from the property, not just the building, but from the property. So with a permit to carry, not only can I go into that school zone, but I can also actually go onto the property.
So a school zone being parking lot or actually interior?
The school zone is 1,000-foot radius of the property. So if it's a school in an athletic field, it's from the corner of the athletic field out. So it could easily be several blocks where you're not allowed to carry into that area under the Federal Gun-Free School Zone Act, unless you have a Minnesota permit or a permit to carry issued by the state in which the school is situated.
Again, my training that I've received says that not even in school zones can you carry. So I am completely confused.
Well, I hope that straightened it out a little bit, but yeah, you can. If you do not have a permit, then what you understand is true. You cannot go into that school zone unless your home is there. You can certainly carry in your home, but you can't take a loaded gun into that area.
Well, nobody would want to anyway, but sometimes they're on you and you have to be in that position.
Well, you could be driving in your vehicle and go through school zones, just going between points A and B, and not intentionally try to violate a school zone, but they're there. There's roads next to them.
Okay. Minnesota Statute 609.666, Subdivision 2, regulates guns and children.
Every state has some form of a law that says if you've got guns in your home, you have to secure them from access to children. That's just typically people that are under the age of 18. So guns and ammunition need to be stored. As someone who has loaded guns, most of my guns are loaded. This could be problematic if I had young kids that either came, grandchildren, or had my own children in that home. So for those people that have permits and have guns that are loaded, they need to take, precautions. Have a gun safe. Mm-hmm. My gun has a lock on it, so I can lock the gun itself, and it just becomes an expensive bullet holder.
Okay.
But so, you got to be able to, protect those firearms so the kids don't have access to them.
So the safety lock is also a way of locking it up?
It is an onboard lock, so I can lock it. You can open it up and take the bullets out, but you can't pull the trigger or pull the hammer back.
Close the breech, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Statute 624.719 or 2, during a state of emergency, prohibits the seizure of firearms.
Yeah, this law was passed after Katrina in 2015, and we have had our first opportunity to see how it worked, and it needs help. As I said, the legislature keeps to itself the exclusive right and authority to regulate firearms and anything to do with that. This law does not change that. And during the emergency that we had, our governor attempted to shut down shooting ranges.
Yeah.
Shooting ranges are a necessary component to the issuing of a permit to carry because a state law requires you do a shooting qualification. And
okay.
The sheriffs were not allowed to stop issuing permits or cancel permits. The process of the whole permit to carry was supposed to continue on uninterrupted. And when the governor attempted to shut down shooting ranges, that was a violation of this law.
Then how did he get the authorization to shut down the places in which to get your permit?
He never had it. He never had the authorization to do that. He merely did it.
Because I know that a lot of people who were trying to get their permits to carry were trying to get someplace to drop them off to.
Mm-hmm.
And those offices were down.
Some of the sheriffs continued to operate, and some of them shut down. And others have elongated the process by requiring appointments. And they're out several months now before you can actually take your paperwork in and make the application.
Doesn't that violate this 7192?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. There was not the protection that we had in the statute, that in the carry law, was that once they have the material, they have 30 days to issue the permit or a reason why they're not going to in writing. There was no way to anticipate that they were going to make people wait 2 or 3 months to take their application to the sheriff.
I believe that law you're describing was why the active shooter at the medical clinic in, was it Watertown? Buffalo. He got his permit based upon that malfunction of that law.
It's possible he did. I haven't heard the details on that.
Yeah.
But like I said, we've got some tweaking to do on this because it didn't function as the legislature intended for it to function.
Well, they knew that he was unstable. I did an episode on him, and the police said he can't not double negative give him his permit. There was some law that they could not violate his civil rights.
Well, if he was a danger to himself or others, that's the reason that sheriffs deny permits all the time.
But because he couldn't prove it, therefore he had to move forward with it. And he also got there was an AR with it too. No, it was just pistol, the old guy. Yeah, heck of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, say the ranges and permits are all there, firearms. Okay, what are we missing in that one? We covered that, didn't we?
Yep.
Okay. Please take out your LTI course. We don't have to deal with that right now, and you can do that in class. Your driver's license short book. And we are going to now avoid conflict. So where are we at? We are 7 minutes and 36 seconds into this segment. Tell me about avoiding conflict, Gene.
Well, avoiding conflict is the simplest way of getting through your day without the need to take your gun out of its holster. And if you're situationally aware and you're paying attention as to what's going on, if you see what you think might be trouble in the street as you're walking down the street, and you're carrying a gun, there's no reason for you to say, well, I've got a gun on, I'm just going to walk right into the middle of that 6 people that are blocking the sidewalk and see what happens. You don't need to do that. All the skills that people have developed over the course of their life to get themselves extracted from a problem, once you're carrying a gun, become even more important to continue to practice those same skills. Just because you got a gun on doesn't mean you can go places that you would probably not go before, or take chances that you wouldn't have taken. It really behooves all of us that are armed to continue to stay out of trouble and to avoid it if you see it.
Sure. It's the fire extinguisher when you need it, not because you have it.
Exactly.
I get it. Okay, we're going to roll the next section there. Conflict you are involved in is automatically an armed conflict.
If for no other reason that I'm carrying a gun, any altercation that I get into becomes an armed conflict. And if the police do get called, how they respond if there's a weapon involved is going to be a lot different than if there weren't any. So I don't have blonde hair. People think I do. I have old red hair. And my 3 kids could tell you when they were younger what buttons they needed to push of mine to get that temper to come out. It doesn't ever come out anymore. It's so rare because it escalates a situation. And if I'm carrying a gun, I don't need that. So I'm more into the de-escalation than I am the escalation.
Okay. How you are perceived counts.
This is kind of a global comment rather than linear. As I said before, if there's a gun involved, we all get blamed for it, or we all get credit for it. And if I behave appropriately and someone notices that you're armed, they're going to get kind of a preconceived notion that, these guys that carry guns, they're not so bad. And conversely, if you are a jerk and they see me armed, they're going to think, there's one of those guys that's an armed jerk again.
Sure.
So we do tend to feed off of each other.
We've covered situational awareness, but now here is a 4 tactical option. Go.
These are not the legal requirements, but they need to be considered if possible. The first is to do nothing, which is really not what you're doing. You're taking in information, you're assessing the situation to try to make a decision on what you want to do. The next one would be to leave. The next one would be to perhaps use less than lethal force. And the fourth one would be to escalate to lethal force. We ask people if doing nothing is scalable, which never makes sense when I say it out loud, but can you do more or less of it? What do you think, Tim?
Well, of course, we are a free will people. I mean, that's what our Lord and Mighty Savior has said. So how do you quantify free will?
Well, in this case, it might be that you're on the phone and your attention is being divided between what you're seeing and who you're talking to. Or there may be a child with you that you've got to deal with while you're trying to pay attention to what's going on in front of you. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to suggest that to the extent that your attention is focused or divided, it's scalable. Is it reversible?
Not if you pull the trigger.
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
We're still in the assessment. So you can say, okay, I don't like what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to leave. So you can stop doing nothing and actually take action and leave. Is leaving scalable?
It depends on when you leave.
Are you thinking that 4 o'clock is different than 5 o'clock or what?
Well, as you said, time is linear. And if you're in a situation where it starts to escalate, at that point, you can no longer leave when it's 0. You're leaving when it's 2 or 3.
Well, maybe. You could have obstacles in your way. You may have your exit blocked with another threat, or you may have to turn around and go to through a window, or throw a chair through a window and leave that way.
Okay.
So it is scalable in that you're not going to just poof right out like they do on Star Trek.
Okay. You're
going to need to work your way around it. Unless you're sitting right next to the door that's the exit, it's probably going to be scalable. You could walk, you could run, you could low crawl, whatever is possible. Mm-hmm. Is it reversible? Could you go back?
If you made the decision to leave, I guess you wouldn't be getting back into that situation. So I would say it's not. Not
without a really good reason.
Uh-huh.
If my wife were not able to get out when I was, I would be inclined to go back and get her.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yep.
But if the threat is still there, I'm not going to say go to my vehicle and get my gun out of my vehicle and then go back in and deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
If the reason why you left is still there, barring any other really good reason to return, I would stay left. I would not go back.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask, is less than lethal force scalable?
Less than lethal force is, I believe, is scalable.
Mm-hmm. That's the force continuum. What's it start with? A command. Drop the weapon.
Okay.
It escalates from there to whatever is available. If it's a 2x4, if it's a chair, if it's a fist, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Is it reversible?
It could be until you pull the trigger. Are we there yet?
Not that.
Okay.
Not that. Let's say it worked.
Okay.
You're in a bar. You hit somebody in the face with your fist, and that took care of the problem. You don't keep hitting them because it was so much fun the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you stop doing it. You leave, perhaps. You can go back to that. It could fail. It didn't work. Now that's proven the need to escalate to lethal force.
Step 4.
Step 4.
Okay.
Is lethal force scalable?
I don't believe that's a scalable function.
It depends on how many times you wiggle your trigger finger.
Okay. All right.
If you simply draw and point, that's 609.06, it's reversible because you haven't shot. If you 065 them, it's not reversible.
So you're giving them a moment of pause based upon your kinetic reaction of where your hands are.
And what you're doing with them.
Yep. I see. That makes sense.
Now, bad guys all have the same problem. They have a lead deficiency. We just don't want to overdose them.
Lead and copper.
Exactly.
Right. Nobody wants to be there. Of course, you don't want to be in that spot. I understand the reversible point, but again, every situation is going to be different.
They are.
And we don't train enough to know every situation. And like the Kim Potter deal, she trains her whole life for this and still in a wrong situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, hoofta, there's just, you don't want to carry a gun, but you have to.
Well, you're starting to understand the point on being concerned, what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is something that you can do?
And for our reviews, I don't think we need to go through that, do we? All conflicts are armed, human perceptions, situation awareness, tactical options. We didn't do a tactical options.
Well, the tactical options are the 4 options we just discussed.
Okay, so that was just previous. Okay, So we covered that slide. And use of threat of force?
Mm-hmm. Use and threat of force. This is essentially where we start talking about the application of force. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be lethal force. It could be less than lethal, and it should be less than lethal most of the time. If you think back on your life and how many times you've been in a situation where you had to use force to extract yourself from the problem, how many times did it involve shooting somebody as opposed to other means of force that didn't involve lethal force? Just because you're carrying a gun doesn't mean you forego those other options.
I do believe that in the state of Minnesota, if you wave your gun at somebody to the use of threat of force, or if you anticipate or shrug or even point to a gun, that's considered a felony.
Well, if you're going to brandish a gun, that to me makes no sense. That's like a warning shot. It's like, what are you doing shooting a cloud? If you're really in danger of death, you don't have time to be acting out all these other behaviors to, kind of fluff up your feathers, if you will, toward the guy that says, I've got a gun, something. If I'm in a situation where that's what is happening, I'm in risk of death or great bodily harm, he'll know I have a gun when he sees the barrel. That's to me the best way to apply that.
And all bets are off at that point.
Yeah. So again, we don't go to the most extreme. Lethal force is the last resort. You've got to exhaust all the other possibilities before you do that.
Well, as you should. Any common sense person who would have a weapon, again, we're not there to pull it and play cowboy.
No, not at all. Nobody, like I said, nobody wants to go through the aftermath of having to shoot someone else.
And again, in our family, we've had that, and I've seen it firsthand, and it is not something you want to go through. Right. Now, this slide depicts who makes that decision. We and you have had this conversation. I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
I know that because of our conversation, and we've had this, we don't make that decision.
We really don't. People think that they're in control of the circumstances. And the fact is you're merely reacting to what you're faced with. You don't control what happens to you. You can control how you respond to it. And once people understand that, this becomes a lot easier to figure out, because they're all thinking, well, do I have to walk down the street and make decisions on who gets to consume any more of my oxygen or not? You should live, you should die, bang. You should live, you should live, you should die, bang. That's not how this works. That's not how this works.
Okay.
So the threat to me is what causes me to react the way I do. And to be honest with you, if I'm reacting to a threat, it's easier for me to explain that than it is if I'm trying to make a decision on, well, why did you decide he had to die? Well, he was wearing the wrong hair, he had a man bun, or whatever the reason. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. But if somebody's trying to kill me, I can explain that. And
yes.
It's not that difficult.
Yes, and as you said earlier in the podcast, that you have to describe and explain that great imminent threat or death to you.
Right.
Okay.
So conversely, if the bad guy is the one who makes the decision that I have to begin applying force, who is it that makes the decision when it's time to stop?
Them.
They are.
Because they've stopped assaulting you.
It's the change in behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We used to talk about this in terms of stopping a threat. And to me, that lacks definition. In the wintertime in Minnesota, we wear heavy coats.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to shoot someone wearing a down parka, am I going to see a hole or blood? I doubt it. But what will I see?
Yes, he'll change his change of behavior.
Change in his threatening behavior.
He's no longer running at you with an axe. He's trying to stand there and keep himself stable or whatever it is.
And when that happens, I can recognize the moment has arrived to stop pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be difficult. When I shoot a deer in the woods, when he's on the ground, I don't keep shooting him.
Right. He's already down.
He's down. I don't need to. Well, this is no different than that.
So we are 21 minutes into this segment, and we're going to come back with the person who loses their head loses the fight. That makes sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody stand by. We'll be back in just a second.
I'd like to talk to you today about security, home security, business security. We here at ProTech Security care about your safety. We've been keeping honest people honest, we like to say, and give dishonest people something to think about for over 20 years. Not only provide high-tech security systems for your home and business, we also provide basic network and router management LAN and Wi-Fi for our residential customers. Support audio and video monitoring systems, card access, security systems, cellular phone amplifiers, home entertainment systems, and much, much more. We have experienced technicians that will design a system that will work for you. We are located in Osseo, Minnesota, and are waiting to design a system to meet all your specifications. That's right, ProTech Security. Give us a call, 763-493-2020. We are pro at keeping honest people honest. ProTech Security, 763-493-2020. ProTech Security Systems.
All right, back with Hutcast here. Gene is in the studio. Gene is a trainer. He is the guy who tells you what to and what not to do and how to avoid doing it. And we left off with the person that loses their head, loses their fight. Gene, you got it.
I think training is the key here. I train every day in one way or another. It may not be that I've got the gun out at the range, but I'm, reading information, reading articles, changes in laws around the country and that kind of stuff. Partly because I've got instructors that rely on me to tell them as things change. And others is that I want to stay up to date and stay current. If you don't train, and to me, that's so important. If you do not train, when you have a crisis, you're going to not have anything to resort to. You're going to lose your head, and you're not going to be able to keep your wits about you, if you will.
Okay.
So that's the reason why if you don't train, you're less likely to come out of this ahead.
And your next slide is how you think when responding to something is different, and how you think when you take action.
Exactly. If you go to the range to practice, the target hangs there and gives you no input. You decide what you're going to do, how many rounds you're going to shoot, where you're going to shoot it, and that kind of stuff. If you're in a defensive gun use, it's exactly the opposite. The target is giving you all the impetus that you need to make your decisions. So how you think when you're responding to something is a lot different than how you're going to think when you're deciding how you want to take the action.
And it does matter. Your slide, this is what you're about, aggressor's intent?
It doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't.
And the court needs to stand in your shoes and see things from your perspective. You can be wrong in your belief, but as long as you have an actual and honest belief and you can articulate that, they have to weigh what you did, the way you did it, from your point of view. It doesn't matter if the aggressor is going to lie about what his intent was. I really wasn't going to hurt this person. I was just trying to have some fun with him or scare him or whatever they may say. Doesn't matter.
Defensive shooting versus tactical shooting, but I noticed that you don't have a tactical shooting.
No, it's not tactical. It's really target. When you're out at the range, you may do some tactical shooting, but to be honest with you, the people that we train, I'd be happy if they just go do target shooting once a month.
Don't shoot their eye out, right?
Exactly.
Wasn't it a Christmas story, I think it was?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Defensive shooting, go ahead.
So the decision-making process to shoot is 180 degrees different than when you're shooting at a target. It's going to be point shooting. I mentioned that earlier, and for those who don't know what that means, you are holding the gun with your hands, and your index finger, your trigger finger, and your two thumbs all three of those are pointing at the target. You're not using your sights. Imagine that if you had an intruder in your home at 2 a.m, your sights aren't going to be of much use unless you're using lasers. So you've got to learn how to point shoot. It's going to be center of mass. So you're going to shoot at the middle of whatever they give you. No fancy shots, no shoot them in the knee or shoot them in the wrist or anything like that. The one thing that you have to do is remember, don't stare at the gun. Stare at the center of whatever they give you to shoot, because if you're looking at the gun, there's a good chance that's what will get shot.
So no Annie-Oakley crap.
Nope. And no warning shot. If you do a warning shot, what you're and I was on the jury weighing your actions, what you're basically telling me is it wasn't the right time to be shooting at all.
Oh.
So don't do that. It'll be close. When people say I'm not using the gun sights at 7 to 10 feet, you don't need them.
No.
It's going to be so close you can point at that target and still hit it. So the focus is going to be on the target. The gun really does need to fit you. And you might not want to stand there quietly. You might want to move because the target could be shooting back at you. And why make yourself an easy target?
And at the price of ammo these days, warning shots are foregone.
Absolutely.
Okay, defensive shooting. Go ahead. The morality of self-defense.
Over the years, people have questioned if it's going to be okay if they were to shoot somebody. Is that condemning them to hell? And I had a class here not too long ago where one of the women in the class actually made a comment that she had been a Catholic, or is a Catholic, and was concerned how God would look at this if she ever had to shoot somebody. And she says, I feel better about it. I think we're going to be okay. Our laws are taken from the Judeo-Christian theologies. There's a correlation between our state laws and how our theological teachings concern self-defense.
Mm-hmm. And
we really never talked about that. And I think we sent a lot of people home scratching their head going, but if I shoot somebody, is it worth it when I have to answer to God why I shot that person? So we actually did some research and I hope are able to give people a sense that, something, there is a moral aspect to this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to do something that our moms and dads told us never to do. Because they didn't think it was right. But at the same time, it's not right for someone to wrongfully take my life. I'll have students kind of close their eyes and just think about that someone wrongfully killed them 10 years ago, and they've been dead for 10 years. How would life on earth be different in the past 10 years if they weren't here?
So you got the judge by 6, carry by 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other way around.
Well, it's about a bigger population than just yourself. Obviously, you care about yourself, but you influence so many people that maybe don't even know who you are because of the things that you do. And so it's really important that you not allow somebody to wrongfully take your life.
Mm-hmm. And prepared to shoot?
This is a tough one. I was in the military for 8 years, so I know what I'm capable of, but that's not necessarily true for everybody. And when the time comes that you have to draw a gun and point it at someone who's actually looking back at you, knowing that muzzle flash may be the last thing that they see on this earth, I don't want people to freeze up. I don't want them to panic. I don't want them to think I can't do this. That's why we talk about this here. There's a story that I tell my students about a visit that I had at the Capitol, talking to a senator who was also a minister,
mm-hmm.
and how he told me at the end, we were repassing the law in 2005, and after we got done with the business, he just said, if somebody was in trouble, I could come to their aid, but if I was being attacked, I don't think I could stop that, which is kind of backwards as how I think. And I had to actually let him get killed and put him in heaven and meet God and go through this whole scenario. I'm cutting an awful lot out for time, but
yeah,
go through this whole scenario where he's now facing God, and God's looking at him and goes, I'm pretty disappointed in you. And he's crushed because he was a minister, and he's talked about, love God, eat your vegetables, and when you die, you go to heaven. And now the man himself is telling you screwed this up. And he says, well, why are you upset with me? And he says, well, the guy that shot you, says he was scheduled to go to hell today, and I put him in front of you to do that for me, and you failed me. And he had to think about it, and he says, I'm going to have to reevaluate this. If someone's in front of you, don't question the fact that there's a reason this is happening.
So you want some divine intervention here.
Could be that there's something going on, and if you screw this up, you're going to have to answer to the guy who trusted you to take care of things.
Oh boy, that's a theological question and answer deal. I don't know if we got the time for that one.
Well, it's how I feel about it.
Right, and it's very good points. So there's a lot of people out there that are very religious, and I would imagine this is on their mind.
It is an issue. It was for me, so I got to think it is for others as well.
So when we talk about the right of self-defense,
used to say it was universal pretty much in scope and scale across state lines, but that really isn't true anymore. In Minnesota, we have justification. In Florida, although they have a stand your ground law, the Florida Supreme Court has put the burden on the victim to prove that they acted in self-defense. Conversely, in Minnesota, if I claim that I acted in self-defense, I'm shifting the burden of proof over to the prosecution to disprove that I acted in self-defense or not. Well, if you don't train and you on the street empty your magazine, you're going to make the DA's job a lot easier to prove that you used excessive force rather than justified reasonable force. So you can make their job easier if you don't do this right. Again, that's a reason why training is important. But in what we teach in Minnesota, you can't necessarily take that across state line and say this is going to be true here too.
Okay. Well, that's an awful lot to think about. We're going to move to defense is a affirmative defense.
Well, that's kind of what I just described. It's an affirmative defense, which means the prosecution has to disprove that I acted in self-defense. And we have 3 standards of proof. We have, preponderance, which is 1 over the hump and you're guilty. Clear and convincing is higher, about 75%. And then we have beyond a reasonable doubt. And the prosecution has to meet the beyond a reasonable doubt threshold when they're trying to disprove I acted in self-defense or not.
Mm-hmm. Does this next slide cover that, or do we want to move forward?
Well, it really kind of is the summary of this. So I want the district attorney to think that, I would have done what he did and let me go home. I don't want it to go to court. If I shoot him 30 times, it's unlikely he's going to think that. But if I shoot him 2 or 3 and accomplish what needs to happen, these guys make their careers based on their won-loss records. And they're not going to go after somebody, usually, that they don't believe that they have a chance of winning that case. Because if they lose too many, they're out of work.
Arrogant pride thing for them, huh? Even if it's right or wrong, they still want to get that win regardless.
Well, and I want to make their job as difficult to prosecute me as possible.
Makes sense to me. So what can I do to?
Well, here's how I do that. There's going to be a cell phone or more cell phones videoing the event. I just expect that. There's going to be security cameras. We are, where can you hide these days without being on camera somewhere? So what you're going to get is the back end of the attack. By the time it starts and starts to mature, that's when the cameras are going to come on for the cell phones. Well, you're missing all the part that's leading up to why this even happened.
Mm-hmm.
If you carry a digital voice recorder or a camera, then you have everything. And the ones that I have are not voice activated. They just are on. So I have everything that's leading up to this event. So I can, in the perp's own words, the DA can hear what happened. All of it.
I believe Jay Leno carries a full-time recorder.
It makes sense. It is so inexpensive. The technology is so inexpensive. And you have at least an audio record of what took place. Mm-hmm. So they can say, I never said that, or I didn't do that, or I didn't mean that, or I didn't whatever. And here you have the audio of it. If you've got the $30 pocket camera, you can get video as well. I mean, the technology is so cheap, it's silly not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with the pocket camera is when you bring the gun up, you're obstructing the view. There are companies that make cameras that go on the end of the gun, which is great because that gives you the back end of it, but it doesn't give you everything. So the two together might make sense.
And we covered 2, 3, and 4 on this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So you carry a good digital voice recorder. We covered that. Well,
one thing that I didn't mention is that Minnesota is a one-party state. So only I need eavesdropping laws. You need to check in the states that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
But in Minnesota, I'm the only one that needs to agree to be recorded. So I don't have to tell the person you're being recorded, by the way.
Yep.
As long as I want to do it, that's all I need to know.
It's been that way for a while, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I take use of that, and that's in my inventory as well. And I live with that constantly. So
right.
Let's see, 4 elements.
These are the legal requirements And this is actually synthesized from a Supreme Court ruling. You'll recall in Minnesota Statute 609.065, it's very vague, very minuscule in terms of what your requirements are. So in State versus Basting, I believe it was, the Supreme Court said there's some things that you guys have to do here to make this work. And the first one is that you've got to be a reluctant participant. You can't provoke the altercation and then claim self-defense. So you were at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
The same things have to be true if you're coming to the aid of other people. So if you're walking into a situation in progress, how do you know who started it? And if you don't know the person, it's a total stranger, your best course of action is to get your phone out and call 911 and be a good witness.
Okay.
If it turns out that's a victim and a bad guy and the victim dies, it's too bad. You don't have to put yourself in harm's way to prevent that.
Okay.
You also have to, I mentioned this earlier, you also have to have an actual and honest belief that you're in danger of imminent death or great bodily harm. Imminent isn't the same as immediate. Imminent means the conditions are there, but it's not necessarily the next thing that's going to happen. Immediate would require it be the next thing to happen. So you don't have to wait until it develops too far down the road to say, hey, I'm going to stop this.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to know that non-lethal force isn't going to work. So no lesser force would do.
Yeah.
And that retreat isn't likely. It isn't practical. Retreat really is practical way back when you're avoiding conflict and you see a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go walk in it. Turn around, go the other direction, or get in your vehicle or go into a building that's maybe nearby a store or something that you can get away from it.
Self-defense is a chain?
It's a chain. And once it breaks, once either retreat opens up, you're no longer in danger of death or great bodily harm. Lesser force might work. You've got to stop applying lethal force or force at all. I mean, if the perp sees your gun and he runs, you don't shoot him. We had a couple in downtown Minneapolis a couple years ago now, walking near Pantages Theater, and three guys, came up to him to mug them. And the gentleman got his gun out. And as soon as the three muggers saw that he had a gun, they ran. Well, as they were running away, the guy shot one of them in the leg. So when Minneapolis rolls up, they arrest the guy for assault with a deadly weapon, which is what they should have done. Once the attack was done, he accomplished what he needed to do. He had no reason to shoot him.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be no different than shooting anybody else walking down the street. You can't do that.
Kind of a revenge taste there.
And that's not okay.
Okay.
That's just not okay.
Okay, the 3 times shoot and evaluate.
Well, again, we want to shoot twice to the chest, once to the pelvis, and evaluate. Do you need to keep shooting or not? Once you get a change in behavior, you're done. You don't need to continue to shoot.
Mm-hmm. And what is the actual DGU?
This is a video, so we won't play it. But this is a video of a defensive gun use at an Aldi's in Milwaukee.
Okay. Let's see. Review. We've covered all that.
Mm-hmm.
Lethal force and crime scene management. We've done that.
Well, this is a little different. This is actually what we suggest people do to identify themselves as a victim. So go ahead and do the next one.
Okay.
We want, and this does not roll off my tongue.
Okay.
I'm more of a Clint Eastwood kind of guy on what I'd like to say, really say to the guy. But if you say anything that sounds aggressive, the victims aren't going to be able to identify you as the victim. So we suggest that people say, stop, don't hurt me, leave me alone, go away. There's not a chance that the perp is going to go, oh, since you asked me so nicely, I'll do it. That's not why we're saying this. One of my FBI guys was just twisting in the wind over this because he said, they're not going to comply with that. I said, that's not why I'm saying it.
Right.
I want my witnesses to see me saying those things.
Yep, setting the stage.
As I'm doing that, maybe take a couple of steps backwards.
Yeah, and unsafety your harness and your pistol and get that ready to go.
And because if I take a couple of steps backwards, that clicks off the retreat requirement.
Yep. Got to egress.
And it's also passive activity. It's not aggressive.
And what to do if someone is with you.
Well, if my wife were with me and there's, I'm going to be careful where I'm shooting, but the bad guy doesn't care. I don't want others getting shot, so I would like to create separation.
Okay. And with that, there are two likely outcomes?
The first is, obviously, that the perp is going to run, hopefully, and you've got to call 911.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't shoot, you've got to call the police, because I can guarantee you as soon as he's around the corner and he thinks he's safe, he's calling 911, reporting you as the guy that was just trying to kill him.
Had a gun and I was minding my own business, merely robbing somebody.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't realize that the dispatchers and 911 dispatchers are sitting next to each other. And if you call right away and he's calling right away, they're going to go, hey, this is the same thing, and they can manage it better.
First call wins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If the perp gets shot, if you have to shoot, then you go into crime scene management mode. So you're going to stick around the crime scene and you're going to tell others to stay back. He still has a weapon. You want good Samaritans to stay out of the way. You don't need another victim getting sucked into this thing. I'm going to be careful on my shots. He's probably not. So there could be other people that got shot or got hurt. Mm-hmm. So you want to find that out. So when we've got people calling for help, how many ambulances are going to be needed to get down here? It's going to demonstrate that you have concern for others' well-being. Mm. If you call 911, we've tried to get the dispatchers to be trained to know what a difference is between a man with gun and defensive gun use. If you say I had a defensive gun use, we want the dispatchers to recognize that you're talking to the victim. If you're talking to a man with gun caller, you're talking to a witness. So understand that there's a difference and treat us differently if you're talking to the victim.
Interesting.
You're required to render aid.
Yeah.
If you've shot somebody, you can't shoot somebody and go, that was close, and go home and crack open a beer and make a sandwich and wait for the cops to show up in 2 days.
Well, in the case of our family one, that he did render aid mm-hmm. to the guy that grabbed his gun and he shot through him. His mouth was all full of blood. Mm-hmm. He couldn't. He tried chest compression. So at that point, he now qualified him as trying to help.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on your training. If you're an emergency room nurse, your expectations on what aid you render are going to be different than if you're a retired insurance broker.
Isn't there a law that the Good Samaritan law says that if you try to render aid, that you're not responsible for that?
Exactly. And rendering aid, if it's not safe, you're not trained to do this, dialing 911 could satisfy that because you're getting help there. You're getting whatever aid you can. But if you're an Army medic and you can find a bread sack to cover the sucking chest wound you've just created, that's a different story because you're used to doing this.
Right. You're trained in trauma.
Yeah. So it depends on you and what's going to be required. If it's not safe, even if you're the greatest surgeon in the world, if it's not safe to render aid, nobody's going to expect you to put your life in danger to do that.
And the next call is to?
Well, it depends. If you're there, I'm going to have you call 911. I'm going to keep my phone available so I can call my wife or my lawyer. Probably will call my wife because I doubt the lawyer is going to be sitting by waiting for the phone to ring. So I want the person who loves me the most on the phone trying to reach an attorney. It doesn't really need to be the world's greatest criminal defense attorney at this point. I just need somebody to stand between me and the system. We can get a criminal defense attorney on the hook here tomorrow or later if need be. But right now, I'm not my best defender. I need an attorney to stand there and take care of things.
No doubt you're not in a mental state of this.
No.
And you're not thinking logically, clearly. You're going to be distraught. You're going to, I've taken a life. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that would run through your head. I'm only assuming that because I've never shot nobody.
It's just not a normal day.
Yeah.
It's going to be completely, you're out of your element. You're in uncharted waters and it's going to be difficult to navigate on your own. You need help.
It's things not to do.
Well, you've just avoided getting killed by the perp. You don't need to get shot by the police when they arrive. You're a threat. Mm-hmm. You have a gun. You've just shot somebody. They don't know who you are. They weren't there when this happened. So it's really important to not get shot by the police.
Yeah, that'd be kind of a win.
You can't mess with the evidence. And I'll generally interrupt myself at this point and ask people how they know when they're under arrest.
When they Mirandize you.
Well, the definition, this is like murder and kill. The outcome to the person is no different. How you got there is a little different. But if you've lost your liberty, you're basically under arrest. Now, we can argue the nuances between being under arrest and being detained all day long, but I'm not able to go home either way. Well, am I evidence?
You're an investigation.
My hand is, my gun is. I can't mess with myself, right? I can't mess with the evidence. So for all practical purposes, before the 911 call ever gets made, I'm going into I'm under arrest mode because I've lost my liberty. I have to stay there if it's safe. So the last thing is that you don't want to talk. The thing that gets people sent to prison more than anything else is their mouth. And as humans, when you're stressed, to decompress, we talk. And that's the surest way to get you sent to prison. So you got to shut your mouth.
They're starting their investigation. You're it.
You're the star witness.
And their job is to cook you and fry you, even though you're not at fault.
Well, average individuals think the police are their friends. And if we just cooperate, this will go okay. And they'll realize that I was just doing what I had to do and let me go home.
Yeah, I don't think it works that way.
Well, they're going to tell you it will.
Sure, they're friends.
Well, they're paid to lie. And that's okay. I mean, the Supreme Court has said the police have the ability to lie to you.
As we do.
As they do. And you don't have any recourse if you've been lied to. You know, just tell us a few things here and I'm sure we can let you go home.
Right.
So you babble and you talk and if they're wearing a mic, it's hot. So you're being recorded. If they say go sit in the back of the squad car, there's cameras and audio in there. Whatever you say is going to be recorded. So it's dangerous for people to try to negotiate this without a lawyer.
Now, my previous trainers have said the exact same things here, so you guys are in alignment.
Good.
And they say, shut up. Don't say nothing. Use the words, I want my lawyer. Because at that point, they can no longer question you.
Right.
So they by law, have to stop at that point. And anything used after that is no good.
Right.
So I get it. Are we on this when the police arrive?
Yep. So the next one is when there are some things you can say that will help your case that doesn't compromise your standing. The first one is when they get there, you can say, he attacked me. Makes you the victim.
Okay.
I'm going to make a report. Who makes reports? The victims or the bad guys? Yep. So does that mean I'm going to go sit in the back of the squad and start writing? I'm going to take my digital voice recorder and my attorney, and we're going to write a report tomorrow that I'm hoping somebody's going to want to buy the movie rights to.
AKA.
Got to make a couple of bucks on this deal somehow, right?
Well, got to pay that guy.
If what he was attacking you with was a broken beer bottle, it wasn't a gun, wasn't a knife, it was an edged piece of glass, but it was just as deadly. But if that's what he was attacking you with and it's laying on the ground, it looks like trash laying there until you say, no, that's the evidence. It's evidence. Yep. There's also other kinds of evidence. While you're waiting for the police to come, if your digital voice recorder is running, you can memorialize the crime scene. Where were the cameras? Sir, did you see what happens? Can I get your name and number? Thank you. Ma'am, did you see what happened? Can I get your name? You don't have to write any of this down.
Isn't that evidence tampering?
No.
Okay.
No, you're collecting, you're memorializing the crime scene. You're not changing anything.
Are you authorized to grab evidence from people?
It's a one-party state. As long as I okay to be recorded, I can record.
I would just seen that a prosecutor would twist that around and say, were you trained in collection of this type of...
I'm just asking for witness information.
Yeah.
That's all. There was a camera. Which way did they go? Did it get a plate number, vehicle ID?
Okay.
How many were there? Were they on drugs or alcohol? What were they wearing?
Speculation.
All this stuff. Yep. All this stuff that may help me down the road.
Did the assailant seem like he was high at some sort? Yeah.
Well, I've got a audio of his language. Does it sound like he was slurring his language or not? I don't know.
Right. And lawyer?
We have a little, on the back of my business card, a little comment that we give people to keep in their wallet, of course, that they may have to repeat, but we do want them to lawyer up. And they may need to say that when they get to the police station and maybe other times besides just the initial contact with the police.
Okay. So don't lawyer up on scene?
No, I would.
Yeah, I would too.
But I can still say he attacked me and there's the evidence and that stuff.
So we are going to preserve our rights?
Right. So the police are going to say, you don't mind if we look in your vehicle, do you? How do you answer that question?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
They don't get to look in my stuff.
If you say yes or no to that question, either way, you've given them the permission they're looking for.
Sure, because it's a double-edged sword.
Because of the way they're asking the question. Like I said, we're at a serious disadvantage in talking to the police on our own. So my answer to that would be I don't consent to any search. I don't consent to any seizure. I'm going to be searched and I'm going to be seized.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether I like it or not. The difference being, is it going to become admissible in court?
Right.
And if I don't usually carry around more than 20 guns and 15 or 20,000 rounds of ammo, but you can only imagine how that might show up in the newspaper.
Paint that picture, right?
Yep.
Okay. After a non-lethal confrontation?
Well, there's going to be, this is like I said, 92% of the time, this is the way it's going to turn out. You're not going to shoot, not going to need to shoot. Mm-hmm. But that also means that he's taken off and you're going to have to find him. And there's going to be more than one story to sort out. And what you say to the 911 dispatcher is really important. You're going to, keep it short and sweet as much as possible. But whatever they do, they, tell you, follow their directions. We've had one of our students was paid a visit by 3 gangbangers in Minneapolis who kicked in her door. And she was standing in her bedroom door with a .38 revolver. Mm-hmm. And the 3 of them standing in her living room, and one of them looked at her and says, "You're not going to shoot us." And she just raised the gun up and cocked the hammer. She never said anything, but that's all she did. That was enough to convince them that she was serious, and they left.
Things got real. She
got on the phone, called 911. They got on the phone and said, "This crazy woman just tried to shoot us." And the dispatchers are sitting again next to each other, and they're figuring out this is the same event. They told her to go in the bedroom, lock the door. The police will knock and announce themselves, and don't open the door for anybody otherwise. They told the 3 gangbangers, "Stay put. We're going to come down and get your story, and we're going to go arrest her." And they stayed.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
So the cops roll up, and they cuffed and stuffed the 3 gangbangers, and they went upstairs.
And they were stupid enough to sit there.
Yep.
Okay, so back to common sense.
So, again, follow the directions, but it's so important not to wait to call 911 because you know darn well that that's what the other guy is doing.
Okay. And let's see, we are like 33 minutes and 26 seconds into this, so stand by. We'll be right back with Hutcast. And that's a wrap for Hutcast. Today on Hutcast, Gene German in www.permittocarry.us. Phone number there is 612-388-2403 in the Leoso Training Group. So again, for Hutcast, we hope you enjoyed this show. If you like us, give us a thumbs up and tell your friends. Again, this is a mini-series. Hopefully we'll try to keep it short so you can enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Again, for Hutcast, thanks for tuning in.